come back around, drop off, and then go back the way they came. Bus loop, they come in up here, they'll loop around, drop off in the back, adjacent to the back commons, the gyms, and the media center, and then they'll go back out here towards the future road development. So also on the site, we've got our main entry down here to the south. If you're looking at this image, it's to the left. The back entry is to the north, and that is adjacent to the sports and athletics fields. All of this has been designed in conjunction with the Facilities and Construction Office. We were able to get input from both the stakeholder user groups and community user groups, and that's how we've arrived at this design here that you see today. So program per the EdSCEC, we've got 1 competition field, 1 practice field, tennis courts, and backstops. So looking at the first floor plan here, we're starting with the middle of the school. The core, you see there, the main entry plaza. Going up through the middle, we've got admin, and then the yellow block you see there in the middle is the media center, surrounded by supporting spaces. To the top left, that purple block you see there, that's your athletics wing, and that's immediately adjacent to the sports fields that you saw on the site. To the top right there is your kitchen, commons, fine arts, and 1 CTE space, which is for architecture and construction, that will require access to overhead doors and delivery, which is why we placed it here. The bottom left, you've got your 7th grade pod with the requisite classrooms, collaboration spaces, and multi-purpose lab. We also have instructional pullout spaces and admin there. And that is mirrored on the 7th grade pod that you see there to the bottom right. Looking at second floor, 8th grade is housed entirely in the core that you see there in the middle. So this is all 8th grade, classrooms, collab space, instructional pullout, admin, and labs. And then to the left, we've got labs for your 7th grade. And to the right, we've got labs for your 6th grade and your CTE labs, STEM, computer lab, human resources, and CTE instruction. So here's our view, a bird's eye view of the front of the school. So what we've done is we've created a plan and a facade that welcomes you into the building. So we're drawing your attention to a grand canopy that's clad with solar panels on the roof so that we can use this as a teaching tool. So if you also notice, we have this grand canopy here, which is the one I'm speaking of. There's canopies that start at entrances and exits here, and they come out and they wrap so that we can have total cover during rain events or other bad weather. So part of this design for net zero, we're dealing a lot with sustainability. We're trying to bring as much sunlight and natural daylight as possible. So what we're doing is using clear story lights over each pod here and over here. And then in the core of the school at the 8th grade pod, we're filtering natural sunlight down through there. This design has 90% of regularly occupied spaces will have access to view and natural light. So here's a closer look at the front. So as you can see, this is your grand solar canopy. This is going to be a really great opportunity to use the school as a teaching tool. Your main materials that you're looking at here, we've got brick, we've got some select stone, and we've got metal panel. This is one of the outdoor learning areas that we have incorporated. Each pod, 7th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, has access to the outdoors. 8th has an outdoor terrace that you saw in the image before. 6th and 7th has these that have access immediately from their pod out to these areas. We're really looking to engage the teachers and students to have curriculum-based activities outside and expand how they're teaching and learning. So our goal throughout this whole process, as we've worked through the education specifications, our meetings with stakeholders, and our meetings with community members, has always been to provide a campus that will inspire and empower your staff, your students, and community members. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, sir. Mrs. Tossan, did you have a comment or question about it?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Burdine. So I was reviewing specifically the instructional pullout space. And and we have, our ed specs require 6, and you guys have 6 in here. I'm a little, so as a parent who has to have ARD meetings and plan these kinds of things at the secondary level, I was looking at the spacing and a little concerned, I guess a little bit concerned at the distance from some of the classrooms. So, for example, so we have on the first floor, we have 2 spaces in the 8th grade pod and 2 spaces in the 7th grade pod, but they're both on the same side of the hallway, which means any 7th grade students who need instructional pullout space across the stairwell, I guess there, it's a little bit of a distance for them to have to walk and go to that space, which makes it really difficult to keep an inclusive environment. So I guess, and I understand logistically why you did it, because we have the multi-purpose areas there, and we're trying to get a bigger area, and so
Sure.
I get why you did that. But just thinking logistically, if my daughter's got to be pulled for a particular reason from the class to do something in an instructional pullout space, we want to get her back in the class as quickly as possible. And anytime you're having to cross corridors like that, or you don't have that classroom right there, it can cause a loss in instructional time. And so that's one of the reasons we did say located within the academic wing. But I think the idea when we talked about this was to ensure that those classrooms are functionally close enough to the academic classrooms so that you don't have that break in time. So I have a little bit of concern about that. And then on the second floor, we have the IPS rooms are sort of centrally located. It looks like we have 6. This is a little small for me, sorry, even with my glasses.
So in the core, that's 8th grade. Those
Yeah, so
IPS
8th
rooms,
grade,
yes.
and then, okay. Is it all? It looks like some 6th grade, some 8th grade. So then if we're mixing grades, so it's what I'm reading is that we're mixing grades, and which would make it equally difficult to have 6th graders and 8th graders would not be utilizing the same space. So maybe I'm reading that wrong. I'm sorry, I can't.
So
really.
the classrooms all live for 6th and 7th live on the first floor.
Okay.
The labs for 6th and 7th and 8th live on the second floor. So
Right, so that's what I'm looking at is labs.
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
So probably, since those are labs, it may not, but I see some 8th grade. So that's just something to maybe think about, because I really don't, I really know that what we want is for our students to get the maximum instructional time, and if they're having to walk too far from that pull-out space, it can make that difficult. So that was my only comment.
Mrs. Dawson, can I clarify? I'm having trouble following your question. Can you help me understand what I hear you asking about is the location of the instructional pull-out spaces?
Yeah, so just to be very direct, if you looked at the 7th grade pod, we have 2 IPS rooms on the same side of that pod.
Okay.
And we have a multi-purpose room across the way.
Got it.
So all the 7th grade classrooms on the other side, if any kids have to walk out of those 7th grade classrooms, they have to walk clear across the hall. And if it's shaped like Baines is, which is what I'm thinking of, and it probably is, because that's the stairwell comes right up in the middle, and you have to literally walk around the hall. There's like not usually easy cut-throughs. Now, I see there's a cut-through here, but it just means that this child's got to leave the space, leave that side of the hall, go all the way to the other side of the hall, get some instructional time outside of the classroom, come back out and walk all the way back into their classroom, and by that time, the class is over or close to over. So the whole purpose of the IPS space is to ensure fluidity, so that if you have to have instructional pullout at all, which you want the minimum amount, obviously. Well, we've just added a bunch of walking and a bunch of time in between, and that was exactly what we were trying to avoid with the ed specs. And we had a lot of conversation around that, because especially in the elementary level and also at the at the secondary level. They're doing a lot of walking and not getting a lot of instruction.
So that makes, I can understand.
Yeah.
So do you think the solution is moving one of those IPSs to the other side?
That's what
So
I
there's
would do, and
one
that's
on
why
each
I said
side.
logistically,
Okay.
I see why they did it, because they were trying to get a large multi-purpose space there and utilize
Mhm.
that space. But academically speaking, instructionally speaking, I think you need one on each side of the hallway in order to accommodate those students. That would be my
And then,
suggestion.
can I want to add to what you're saying about the second floor as well? I think I understand what you're saying, because if the seventh grade pod is to my left,
Mm-hmm.
and then I go upstairs, I have some seventh, looks like some sixth and eighth grade over in that
Yeah.
area.
Right.
Like we have one eighth grade lab way on the far left corner here. This is the eighth grade lab. And then, but the eighth grade pod is where, the eighth grade pod is upstairs
It's in the center, it looks
in
like.
the sitter. And then you have another eighth grade lab way on the other side of the second floor as well. So I would assume that if the majority of the labs are on the second floor, that when I go from the seventh grade pod downstairs, I can go right upstairs to my labs. So I don't have as far to walk, like across the second floor or whatnot.
That's correct.
And
The
vice versa for
sixth grade.
the sixth grade lab and eighth grade being in the middle. I should be able to just kind of go up and down in the vicinity of where my
Right.
pod is. And so it looks like we've got labs kind of spread out and for the different grade levels.
Right.
Is that
so-
intentional?
No, they're organized based on the pods. The grade levels are stacked, except for eighth, which is what you were pointing out. Eighth grade labs are to the left. You see those here. These are eighth grade labs. Seventh grade labs are across the hall. Seventh grade classrooms are right down these stairs. So sixth grade labs are here. Sixth grade classrooms are right down these stairs. So what you were saying is true. You go from your pod neighborhood directly upstairs into your lab spaces.
Maybe I just can't read it because it's so
I think it's
small.
I
That
understand.
could be
Yeah.
that could be it, because it looks like some of it's sixth versus eighth grade. And then just one more question. for
We don't
conf-
have any sixth grade spaces immediately adjacent to eighth grade spaces.
Which is good.
Okay, good. And then so I do have a question, because this came up in another school that I visited around conference rooms. I saw there was some conference spaces. I think it's on the bottom on the first floor in the blue by the seventh grade classroom, and then there's some.
Those are AP suites. The AP has an office for the AP, a room for the admin assistant, and a conference room for them. As per the ed spec, those are to be placed within the academic pod.
So is there a space for where the principal could have a all-hands meeting
Oh,
and
sure.
provide instruction?
Yes.
Where's that located?
So there's several conference rooms in the main admin wing down here. Yeah.
So if I need to bring all my staff in for a meeting, is there space to do that?
Either the Commons, the Media Center, or one of the gyms would be the best place for that.
Okay, I know that was a concern I've heard, where
Okay.
not just to be able to teach a lesson, I don't want to say teach a lesson, but provide some instruction, that kind of thing, in order for them to have a meeting or whatnot that's, not necessarily in the commons. So I just was wondering.
I think that's gonna be in some of these multi-purpose spaces too. It sounds like there's a lot of different spaces in this design that
Right.
are very large.
Yeah.
But if we're looking at moving IPS rooms, it does make those I mean, I don't know, you guys are the creative guys.
Yeah,
So that's,
we can redistribute those
Yeah.
spaces. We'll still adhere to the square footage sizes that are outlined in the ed spec.
thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions?
I have a question.
We good? Mr. Rice, did you have a question or comment? Ms. James?
Well, this was kind of related to what that they were talking about. Remind me what the PLC space is? What is that? That was another learning.
Professional learning community.
So that has its own room, or that's like a teacher workroom kind of space? But that could be moved. I mean, that could be a longer walk, right, or not?
Well, it can be,
Okay.
but we'll look at all of that.
Okay.
Go for it.
Okay, thank you. Oscar asked me to step up here. The PLC space is intended to be a grade level planning space, so maybe science is off first period so they can float in, have their conference period, do their instructional planning. There'll be a projector, so if they want to model an instructional strategy, then when they go back into classrooms, the math team could float in for 7th grade during their conference and have planning. It also allows for grade level team meetings if needed.
All right, thank you. Mrs. James, did you have any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. Oh, sorry, Mr. Rosenthal had one more. Excuse me.
It was the first one, too. Okay. As far as the net zero design, I think it's cool. But what do you anticipate the additional cost for design and construction, and what would be the payout?
So that's a great question. That was one of the first things that we talked to our engineer about, what would be the premium on this building. Our engineer is from the DFW area. They did a net zero school with us in Irving, and they've also done net zero and geothermal across the country, including coastal areas, places with similar climates like us, like North Carolina and South Carolina. So the answer was, by the time we get done with credits and other efficiencies, this is going to come in very close to the same that you would pay for a 4-pipe system. So the premium is not going to be much at all.
So the payout would be pretty quick.
Yes, the last time that we had done a net zero school, the technology wasn't quite as advanced as it is now, so the payback on that was 7 years. However, technological advances and cost reductions in systems like LED, we're going to see the payback on that to be inside of 5.
It'd be interesting to actually see that when you guys get a little further.
Sure.
Like put out a little presentation or something, just so we can kind of highlight that. So.
Absolutely. I'm Eric Morgan, principal of the education team. At our other school that we did the net zero technology, what AJ said about the geothermal is absolutely true. It's equivalent to a central pipe system. The premium that you're going to pay is on the solar. The solar system that collects and converts the energy is a bit of a premium. And the payback that AJ mentioned is the time it would take to recoup the expenditure,
Right.
the upfront expenditure
Right.
that you spent on the solar panels to pay back through savings and energy costs. So we will completely model this building in the energy model to where it will prove out, and we'll have those paybacks, and we'll bring that information back to you.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. And then on your design, the overhangs or the walkways or whatever you call them.
Canopies?
Yeah, the canopies, like at sidewalk level. Are those also solar panels or?
Yes.
They are. Okay,
They
I
are.
couldn't tell from the drawing, but
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, they are.
All right, cool.
Oh, go ahead, Mrs. Hellier.
Yeah, so I just have one more question then about maintenance then. So as I look at that, because that's not the normal type of building, what does our maintenance look like for that?
Right, so when we put solar panels on the roof, we want to make sure that you can still maintain your roof. That's the most important thing. So what we do is we're actually ballasting the solar panels on racks up there, and that just means you're putting sandbags on the skids where these panels set so that you can move them if you have a leak or you have to replace your roof, right? So we're not encumbering the roof with a solar panel that you can't get around, and getting for maintenance and things.
Okay, so based on page 4, is this the normal, on page 4 of the presentation, is this our normal type of build out?
So the
No,
ICF
right, it's right, no,
system.
it's not right. So that's why I'm asking, so
Right.
if something was to happen here,
On the walls?
yeah,
So,
This is, right, yeah.
Right, so you, in appearance, looking at it, you'll never be able to see the difference between a normal, any of your other buildings. It'll still be a brick building with sheetrock on the inside. The core of the wall, rather than being studs, is actually concrete. So what the ICF technology is insulated concrete form. So it's styrofoam blocks that are stacked up kind of like Legos, and then you fill them with concrete. And this provides a super continuous high R value insulation wall that's also wind resistant. So if anything, your maintenance would be less in terms of, you know, how often do you open up a wall and have to do something inside of it. But all the plumbing and electrical is run in the styrofoam on the inboard side, so it's easily accessible.
Okay, I think that's what I was missing, where the plumbing was running to. Okay, all right, thank you.
Go ahead, Dave.
And then the geothermal is kind of like a passive system, right? But there's still got to be, I mean, that's not going to cool the whole building. I mean, that's just
No, it's not.
supplemental, right?
Right.
I mean,
It's not quite passive because all of those wells will be tied to ground source heat pumps that then power the HVAC system for the building.
okay.
So it's a passive, non-passive system. It's a hybrid.
Okay.
Yeah, if you think of a heat pump like you would have on your house, it doesn't have a well. It just uses the air to exchange the heat. Well, this well uses the constant temperature of the earth
Right.
as a kind of a flywheel. So it is passive in that sense, but you still have condensers, and they just have a longer life and much more efficient.
Okay.
What are the life expectancies of the solar panels?
Right, so that, as AJ said, those are getting better every day. And the ones we're seeing now are 20 years minimum.
Okay. So in 20 years, is it going to be a big cost for us to I mean, how do we maintain and replace? Do we maintain and replace them on a cycle, or what does that look like?
Right, so the lifespan of the solar panel itself is rated in terms of efficiency. And the silicon, you know, in the panel itself degrades over time. And so when you reach a certain point of efficiency, they say you're not getting the benefit of it, right?
Okay.
It won't stop working, in other words. It will just drop in efficiency to the
Okay.
point where you may not be achieving net zero anymore.
Understood. Mr. Rice?
Well, net zero means we're not going to have an electric bill, correct?
It means that the energy savings will offset your electric.
Offset the electric bill, so it's pretty efficient. And what are we going for in LEED certification?
Gold.
Gold?
Yeah.
Awesome. It's a great-looking building. One last question. What kind of surface are you putting in the outdoor courtyards? Is that going to be natural turf, or is it going to be artificial turf?
It's going to be natural grass. They're wide enough to where we shouldn't see any issues whatsoever as far as daylight hitting them and having troubles with growth.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
And if I may, as we develop it further, we are going to look to see if there's a benefit to go ahead and go with turf. And if there is, then that's what I would like to bring back at the end.
I think that'd be nice.
Yeah, I think that would be better. I just can't, I mean, I don't know, isn't Elkins like that too? Where is that natural turf that's in there at Elkins? Natural turf right now? So I'm just thinking about, excuse me, just the maintenance of all this, you know. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate the presentation. It's a beautiful school. Next, 6E2F, review the 2018 bond program project budgets. Mr. Perez, are you going to?
Yes, so what we're bringing tonight is we want to go ahead and bring to you all an approval of something that we thought we had brought before and received approval. When we brought the project budgets, we brought 3 different exhibits of how the budgets were set up, 3 different ways. When we looked at the minutes as we were moving forward, it was not evident and clear that the approval was for all 3. And in order to be able to be in compliance with CV Local, we need to make it clear that Exhibit 3 is part of the approval process that this board, approved. It doesn't change any budgets, it doesn't change any projects. It's just a clarification so that we are in compliance with CV local.
And we're going to be voting on this next week?
That is correct.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Moving along to audience items, which we don't have anyone sign up to speak this evening. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Meeting is adjourned.